Hello, my name is Trinity Druckenmiller, and today Grace Daw and I will be talking about the poet Charles Wright.
So, some background information. Charles Wright was born on August 25th, 1935, in a town called Pickwick Dam, Tennessee. I could not find any information about his family or time growing up in the South. However, many of his poems include aspects of Southern life and the power that it holds in the past and present. So, he was obviously influenced by growing up in the South. So Charles is married to Holly Wright, who is a well-known American photographer. He attended Davidson College in 1957 and actually studied history, not poetry. He didn't begin writing and reading poetry until he was in Italy for the U.S. military. He was a translator for 4 years in Italy. So after the military, he received his master's degree at the University of Iowa's Writers' Workshop. So, early work and inspiration. So, while in Italy, Charles took great inspiration from a poet named Ezra Pound, specifically his epic poem, The Cantos. This epic helped Charles learn about, quote, out of the way places, and he used it as a guide when writing his first major collection called The Grave of the Right Hand, which was published in 1970. This collection explores themes of morality, memory, and how our physical bodies connect to the spiritual world. Charles also took great inspiration from William Carlos Williams, Walt Whitman, and especially Emily Dickinson. He actually said in an interview, quote, Emily Dickinson is the only writer I've ever read who knows my name, whose work has influenced me at my heart's core, whose music is the music of songs I've listened to and remembered in my very body. So he thought very highly of Emily Dickinson. So about his poetry, although he was heavily influenced by modernist poets like Ezra Pound and William Carlos Williams, Charles is not considered to be a modernist poet. He believes that his work is much more personal than modernist poems, and when he is writing, he puts himself into his poems. Most of his poetry can actually be considered autobiographical poetry, which is poetry that reflects the author's life experiences. Some of his later works of poetry have characteristics of postmodern poetry, although he is not a primary figure in this movement. This movement focuses on the rejection of traditional form and structure and the discontinuity of reality. Charles likes to focus on sound patterns when writing and adds a musical voice. He often explores themes of the past, memories, personal salvation, and the relation of our physical and spiritual bodies. His poems also show how we can find divine meaning and purpose in our day-to-day life. Charles does not have a specific poem that made him famous, but rather his reputation has steadily grown throughout his career. Some of his more well-known collections are The Other Side of the River, which he published in 1984, Chickamauga, which we'll talk about a little later, which he published in 1995, and Appalachia, which he published in 1998. So, affiliations. So, he began teaching at the University of California, Irvine in 1966, and then he moved back to Italy to be a Fulbright scholar in 1968. In 1983, he became the Sauter Family Professor of English at the University of Virginia, and this is where he retired in 2010. He is now 89 years old.
Now I'll be talking about the awards and accomplishments that Charles Wright has attained throughout his career. The ones that I picked specifically, I picked them because I think that they truly highlight the impact that he has had on American poetry. Wright has won multiple awards throughout his career, such as the National Book Award, the Penn Translation Prize, the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize, the Lenore Marshall Prize from the Academy of American Poets, and the Pulitzer Prize, and many more, as you can see on the bullet point. A lot of these awards that he had received in his career were actually in the beginning of his career during his early works of poetry. Wright has published over 24 poetry collections, and in the last bullet point, I believe really does wrap up the impact that he has made on American poetry. He was elected a Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, and he served there until 2002. And then in 2014, he was appointed United States Poet Laureate.
Now I'll be reading Chickamauga by Charles Wright. Dove twirl in the tall grass. End of summer blaze next door. On the gloves and split ends of the conked magnolia tree, work sounds, truck backup beep, wood tin hammer, cicada, fire horn. History handles are passed like spoiled fruit. Mid-morning, late-century light calicoed under the peach trees. Fingers us here, fingers us here and here. The poem is a code with no message. The point of the mask is not the mask, but the face underneath. Absolute incommunicado, unhoused and peregrine. The gillnet of history will pluck us soon enough from the cold waters of self-contentment we drift in, one by one, into its suffocating light and air. Structure becomes an element of belief, syntax, and a grammar a catechist. Their words what the beads say, words thumbed to our discontent.
So my thoughts on the poem Chickamauga. Over the overview of the poem, it looks on how history, memory, and language affect the way we see ourselves and the world, but also how it sometimes confuses us or fails us. The poem starts with peaceful images of the South, like nature and everyday sounds, but as the poem progresses, it goes deeper and it shows how the past still affects us and how that's hard to explain the real truth with words. One of my favorite lines in the poem, the line, "The poem is a code with no message," Wright suggests that the poem itself, or the poetry itself, is like a mystery, a puzzle that doesn't really offer clear answers. Overall, though, I do believe the poem is strong because it shows how we try and find meaning in life and history, but sometimes we could just never fully understand it.
And then here is our works cited page.